All right, everybody. Hope you're all doing well out there. Welcome back to the show. Lots of news to get into today, a lot having to do with Israel. Starting off at number one, our big story of the day is that an Israeli official just showed up to the United States last week and tried to meet up with a minor over the internet. Crazier than that is that he was sent back to Israel after being arrested, which is just wild. We'll get into the details about that. Also, Benjamin Netanyahu did another podcast appearance, this time with the Triggernometry guys. And he said a lot of crazy things that are very easily debunkable. So we'll get into some of that as well. So welcome back to the Quest for Clarity podcast.
Americanism, not globalism.
I am not a slave. I am a free citizen.
There should be no Federal Reserve system.
Only America first.
End all of these wars. America is trying to play empire. We want everything released. And you're actively covering it up. It's not America first to be pushing our influence in areas where it shouldn't be. We're run by people that don't understand what they're doing and don't understand the ramifications of the policies they're enacting. That's an incredibly dangerous situation. All right, guys, just before we begin, if you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing here on YouTube, I really appreciate it. It helps me out a lot. Also, if you wouldn't mind going to Instagram, X, and Spotify, following all my pages over there, I really appreciate it. And let's get right into the news. So, starting off, our first story is that Tom Alexandrovich, a senior department head of Israel's National Cyber Directorate, was arrested last week while in Las Vegas. And the reason he's in Las Vegas is pretty crazy. He was here to meet with the FBI and the NSA at a conference. So let's step back a little bit. 8 people were all arrested last week as part of an organized sting operation by the FBI and by the Las Vegas police that they were targeting. It's kind of a common thing. You've probably seen videos of like this on the internet where they kind of set up decoys on these dating apps to catch people in the act of trying to meet up with a minor for... You can fill in the blank there. But they caught these 8 guys, one of which was Tom Alexandrovich, who is, of course, a senior Israeli official. This is just wild. This is a bombshell piece of news. He's arrested, and the details about this are pretty crazy. I'm just going to read the article. This is from the Times of Israel. Senior Israeli cyber official detained in Las Vegas as part of child solicitation probe. Cops say Tom Alexandrovich, a cyber directorate division head, faced charges of luring a child with a computer. So, senior official is arrested in Las Vegas as part of this organized sting operation. And just the other day, there was a whistleblower who leaked to the Breaking Points show on YouTube a lot of the details about the interview with Tom Alexandrovich, between Tom Alexandrovich and the police. In the interview, the first thing he does is ask for the police to contact the embassy. Now, they don't do that, but it's very crazy that the first thing he does is basically trying to reach out for help. He asks them to contact the Israeli embassy. Later on, they ask him a bunch of questions, and he reveals that this whole week, prior to this happening, prior to the arrest, he had met with the FBI and NSA officials already on this trip to America. So this guy is here in America for a conference with our FBI and our NSA officials, and just in his free time is texting some minor on the internet trying to meet up. This is the best and brightest, clearly. And then as the interview concludes, the police contacted the Israeli consulate, and Alexandrovich requested that they reach out to the embassy again, to which they refused. And they did not take his passport, which allowed him, obviously, to flee the country in the next flight back to Israel. As he got off the plane in Israel, there was no arrest made. He's placed on leave at the directorate that he works for, but nothing yet. They say when the Israelis say when they get information from the United States, then they'll act accordingly. Doesn't seem to be any information being shared from what we know. And at the moment, they didn't take his passport. The FBI did not take his passport. And now you have Pam Bondi and Kash Patel acting like, oh no, guys, how did he get away? Who messed up here? You messed up. The FBI and the DOJ did not take his passport, which allowed him to flee after they knew he was an Israeli government official who would likely be going back to Israel. So Benjamin Netanyahu has not made a statement yet. And seems to be harboring him back in Israel. There's nothing happening to him. He's been placed on leave, but that's about it. And he has a court date, but there's no reason to believe he'll come back for the court date. If there's no ability to get him extradited here, then how is he supposed to what are we assuming that he'll just show back up? So this is all just a terrible PR situation for the Israelis. And for Benjamin Netanyahu to not at least come out and make a statement saying, we're going to get to the bottom of this, this guy is fired, and we're going to get to the bottom of this and report our findings back. No statement. Just, this is what happens. And this is just, it's just like insulting that we're expected to just take it. Some guy from another country, some Israeli government official comes into the United States, tries to get in contact with an American minor, and then is just allowed to flee and is being harbored back in Israel? Are we joking? And there's no statement of any urgency from anyone in the United States government to get this guy back here. And no statement from our greatest ally, Benjamin Netanyahu, about one of his government officials trying to meet up with an American minor. It's just absolutely disgusting. And it's just another piece of the massive PR disaster, another piece of the puzzle to why American support for Israel is at all-time lows. It's of course not just this. It's also the fact that they're killing tens of thousands of people in Gaza with our American taxpayer dollars. And the fact that all of our politicians seem to be bought and owned by foreign agents. So, as this PR disaster is happening, it seems like we'll move on now to Netanyahu's appearance on the Triggernometry podcast. So, Netanyahu, it seemed, I bet this was recorded before this all broke, because there was no questions asked about this to Netanyahu. But of course, Triggernometry, hosted by Konstantin Kassin and Francis Foster, they are very pro-Israel. Konstantin Kassin is, at least. He's done debates on this on Piers Morgan. But he was saying he's going to ask the tough questions of Benjamin Netanyahu. So let's just watch this one clip. This is the one clip I want to show, where he does ask Netanyahu about Israel's historic support of Hamas in propping them up over the last couple decades. So it's very interesting, Netanyahu's response to this, and then I'm going to just completely debunk it so nobody has to believe this guy, because this guy's just a pathological liar. So he said, Netanyahu basically claims that this is all just not true. So let's get into this real quick. Here's the clip.
Before Francis takes over, I have one more question. I think even your worst critics wouldn't deny the incredible success you have had in taking down the Iranian proxies and Iran's capabilities itself. But one of the things that we have heard here in the West, and I wanted to get your perspective on it, is that in the run-up to what happened on October 7th, for many, many years, the Israeli government was allowing Qatar to pump money into Hamas and using that, in effect, to strengthen Hamas against the Palestinian Authority to prevent a united Palestinian state. What do you say to those claims?
Well, I think it's hogwash. I mean, we're stuck with Hamas. I was actually against leaving Gaza and resigned from the government when it did so, when it decided to tear out the settlements, because I said this will be overtaken by Hamas, and Hamas will use it as a platform, will use Gaza, a de facto Palestinian state in Gaza, to pellet us with missiles and rockets, the surrounding cities. This was poo-pooed by the government at the time. I thought it was insane. But once they gave up Gaza, that's exactly what happened. Hamas took it over and turned it into a terror bastion. And the question was, what do you do with it? Well, there were various theories. One of it was that you have to aid the civilian population in such a way that you don't have diseases. So you've got to take care of the sewage, you've got to take care of electricity, you've got to make sure there's no famine there. And that was the policy that advocated giving money, which was partial money, by the way. Of all the money, the billions that went into Gaza, this was a fraction, and it was monitored. So it didn't really make the difference. And it also, what did they do with the billions that they got, not from Qatar? The billions that they got, they built a terror city underneath, terror tunnels.
All right, so there we have Benjamin Netanyahu essentially trying to downplay the idea that Israel allowed money to flow in from Qatar to fund Hamas over the past decades leading up to October 7th. And he says that's hogwash. He says that, and he says that's not true, while simultaneously acknowledging that money did go in, but only a small little bit. Out of the billions that went in, only a little bit was from Qatar through Israel's funneling of it to Hamas. So not really clear in his answer there, but let's just go through what actually happened. So New York Times reports that, quote, for years, Israeli intelligence officers even escorted a Qatari official into Gaza, where he doled out money from suitcases filled with, quote, millions of dollars. There's one. Netanyahu was also quoted at a Likud party conference in 2019 saying, quote, those who oppose a Palestinian state should support the transfer of funds to Gaza. Let me explain this to you guys. The whole point of funneling money into Hamas for Israel was to separate Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, the two rivaling government entities pretty much in Gaza and the West Bank, in the occupied territories. It was the Palestinian Authority and Hamas being the more radical, more terrorist-like state, or government, I should say. The point of propping Hamas up was, in Netanyahu's own words, anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. This is part of our strategy to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank. The point of this was to isolate the people under the rule of Hamas in Gaza from the people in the West Bank under the rule of the Palestinian Authority. And Hamas, being the more radical Muslim extremist group, portrayed to the world that all the Palestinians were radicals. All of them didn't want to make peace. All of them were terrorist supporters. That's what he was attempting to do, number one, by propping up Hamas. And number two was to convince liberals in Israel who wanted to make peace with the Palestinians that Hamas was too radical to make peace with. That was the point. Also, and just for more proof that this was the policy, on October 8th, the Times of Israel had an article titled, quote, for years, Netanyahu propped up Hamas. Now it's blown up in our faces, end quote. That is the title of October 8th article from the Times of Israel. It was used, quote, to prove both to Israelis and the world that a two-state solution was impossible. Netanyahu could say, according to the New York Times, quote, I have no partner. I have no partner for peace. And another Netanyahu quote, everyone knows this, but we control the height of the flame. This is just nonstop arrogance from Netanyahu, that they could prop up Hamas, but only prop them up to a point where they couldn't threaten Israel, but where they would portray all Palestinians as radicals and terrorists. This was the point. None of this was to try and get aid in, as he's trying to get aid into the Palestinians, and none of it was not substantial. This was quote briefcase full of millions of dollars in cash, and Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, was the ones facilitating the money coming in from Qatar, millions of dollars to Hamas to prop them up. I bet some of you guys didn't know that. They act like naturally Hamas is just there. No, Hamas wasn't just there naturally. They were there and then used by Israel to prop up as the government in Hamas, in Gaza, to portray the Palestinians as not wanting peace. Both Mossad and IDF's Gaza division went to Qatar to, quote, beg the Qataris to keep sending money to Hamas. Bezalel Smotrich, who we've talked about before, the finance minister, said in 2015, he said, quote, in the game of delegitimization, the Palestinian Authority is a burden and Hamas is an asset. Hamas is an asset, says Bezalel Smotrich in 2015. So, this is all just part of, and also one more quote. If all this wasn't enough, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert said in an interview with Politico, quote, in the last 15 years, Israel did everything to downgrade the PA, Palestinian Authority, and to boost Hamas. Gaza was on the brink of collapse because they had no resources, they had no money, and the PA refused to give Hamas any money. Bibi saved them. Bibi made a deal with Qatar, and they started to move millions and millions of dollars to Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu made it his explicit goal for over a decade of propping up Hamas to portray all Palestinians as radicals, so that he would never have to give the Palestinians a state. There's multiple quotes, not just from Benjamin Netanyahu, but from Smotrich, from Ehud Olmert, from intelligence officials, to Mossad officials, that make this case explicitly clear. For him, his only response to all this, And Konstantin Kisin should have had these quotes ready to push him on this, but he didn't. But his only response to all this is hogwash. It was an unsubstantial amount of money. Yeah, okay. There's still all this, so you didn't answer for any of this. It's all just nonsense. The idea that none of this is significant. Of course it's significant. You have the highest ranks of the Israeli government admitting on the record that this was their goal. This was their whole plan. And the best we can get out of Netanyahu to address this is hogwash? Yeah, okay. It's obvious why Israel's losing the PR war. Because they think everyone out there who's learning this and seeing the images coming out of Gaza, they think all of you are too stupid to do 10 minutes of research and realize the entire narrative's fake. While meanwhile, their government officials are coming to America and trying to get active with minors. Yeah, it's pretty obvious why their approval is down to its lowest in history, as we continue to send that government billions and billions of dollars to fund their killing of tens of thousands of innocent people. So it doesn't look like it's getting any better for their propaganda, which is a great thing. But our government doesn't seem to be changing their policies, so there's still more work to be done, of course. But for the right and the left to be united on this issue is so important going forward. And it's going to have to be a prerequisite to anyone who's going to be a contender in 2028, hopefully, that they will speak out against things like this. Because all this is just unacceptable. And the fact that our government continues to go along with it is unacceptable. Or at least it should be to anyone who has any sort of self-respect for themselves and for the country that is being taken advantage of by this welfare state that is Israel. So that's where I think I'll end it off today. Little rant to end off the episode. But please be sure to like and subscribe for more of this, more of these rants. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to follow me on Instagram, X, and Spotify. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll see you guys real soon. Have a good day.
Americanism, not globalism.
I am not a slave. I am a free citizen.
There should be no Federal Reserve system.
Only America first.